The first time Evelyn noticed her daughter watching her, with that look a mixture of concern and calculation, was at the family barbecue last summer. She'd been carrying a tray of deviled eggs from the kitchen when her ankle caught the edge of the patio step. She didn't fall, merely stumbled, but Margaret was at her side in an instant, gripping her elbow with unnecessary force. "Mom, be careful. Do you need to sit down?" Margaret's voice carried across the yard, drawing every eye to them. Evelyn had smiled tightly, extracting her arm from her daughter's grasp. "I'm fine, dear, just missed the step." But that moment marked the beginning. The concerned phone calls increased. The not-so-subtle comments about the stairs in Evelyn's two-story colonial. The pamphlets for senior living communities that appeared on her coffee table after Margaret's visits. At 67, Evelyn Harrington had buried a husband, raised 2 children, managed a successful accounting practice, and traveled to 23 countries. She'd survived breast cancer 5 years ago, without anyone needing to hold her hand. Yet suddenly, in her daughter's eyes, she'd become fragile, incapable. A problem to be solved. Today's lunch at Margaret's sprawling suburban home was no different. Evelyn sat at her daughter's gleaming kitchen island, watching Margaret chop vegetables with the precision of a surgeon. "I was talking to Dr. Reynolds last week," Margaret said, not looking up from her cutting board. "You know, from my practice? His mother is at Golden Sunset now, and he says it's just wonderful. Activities every day, medical staff on site, no worries about home maintenance." "How nice for her," Evelyn said, sipping her iced tea. "Is this the same Dr. Reynolds whose mother has Alzheimer's?" Margaret's knife paused mid-chop. "Well, yes, but the facility has different levels of care. Independent living, assisted living. I'm aware of how retirement communities work, Margaret. I helped your father's mother choose one, remember? When she actually needed it." Margaret set down her knife and looked directly at her mother. At 42, her daughter was a successful pediatrician with 3 children and a husband who worked in finance. Her life was ordered, scheduled, and controlled, much like she wanted everyone else's to be. "Mom, I'm just thinking ahead. That house is too big for you now, the maintenance alone. I have a gardener for the yard, and a cleaning service twice a month," Evelyn interrupted. "The same arrangement your father and I had for 20 years. But Dad's not here anymore," Margaret said softly, her voice taking on that gentle tone Evelyn had come to detest, the one she probably used with anxious parents in her pediatric practice. "And those stairs. When I think about you going up and down them at night." Evelyn straightened her spine. "I've been navigating stairs for 67 years without incident. I don't plan to stop now." The front door slammed, and Margaret's oldest, 15-year-old Emma, stormed into the kitchen, face flushed with teenage indignation. "Mom, Zachary took my charger again, and now my phone's dead, and I was in the middle of a really important conversation with Lily about the science project." Margaret sighed. "Hello to you too, Emma. Say hello to Grandma, please." Emma turned, noticing Evelyn for the first time. Her scowl instantly transformed into a smile. "Grandma, I didn't know you were coming over today." She rushed to give Evelyn a hug, the kind of enthusiastic embrace only grandchildren seemed capable of providing. "Just having lunch with your mother," Evelyn said, returning the hug. "How's school?" "It's fine. Except for this group project that's worth like 25% of our grade, and I got stuck with partners who don't do anything." Emma hopped onto the stool next to Evelyn. "Hey, can I come over this weekend? Dad's taking the boys to that baseball thing, and Mom has that conference, and I really don't want to go to Aunt Sarah's because her kids are so annoying." Margaret cleared her throat. "Emma, Grandma might have plans." "I'd love to have you," Evelyn said quickly. "We could bake those chocolate chip cookies you like and watch old movies." Emma beamed. "Perfect. Mom, can you get my charger from Zach before you go? And tell him if he takes it again, I'll tell everyone about the time he—" "Emma," Margaret warned. "Go handle it yourself, please. Appropriately." With a dramatic sigh, Emma slid off the stool. "Fine. See you this weekend, Grandma." She bounded out of the kitchen with the same energy she'd entered with. Margaret turned back to her salad preparation. You don't have to take her, Mom. I can arrange for her to stay with a friend. Why wouldn't I want my granddaughter to visit? Evelyn asked, genuinely puzzled. My house has 4 bedrooms. It's hardly a hardship. I just meant, well, teenagers can be a lot. Emma's going through a phase right now. All teenagers go through phases. I survived yours, if you recall. Margaret's cheeks colored slightly. That's different. You were younger then. And there it was again, that constant reminder of her age, as if the passing years had somehow diminished her capabilities rather than enhanced them. Margaret, Evelyn said carefully, I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly fine in my home. I have no intention of moving to a retirement community or anywhere else. Margaret placed a salad in front of her mother. I just worry, Mom. You're all alone in that big house. What if something happens? I have a cell phone. I wear that medical alert bracelet you insisted on. My neighbor George checks on me almost daily, usually under the pretense of borrowing something he'll never return. Evelyn picked up her fork. I'm not alone, Margaret. I have friends, activities, volunteer work. My life is full. Margaret sat down across from her mother, her expression serious. Dad's been gone 3 years now. Don't you get lonely? The question caught Evelyn off guard. Of course she got lonely. There were moments when the silence in the house seemed to have physical weight, when she reached across the bed in the middle of the night, still expecting to find Robert's warm presence after 41 years of marriage. But loneliness wasn't something that could be cured by a smaller living space or organized bingo games. Sometimes, Evelyn admitted. But that's part of life, isn't it? Your father and I built that house together. Our memories are there. Your childhood bedroom. The marks on the wall where we measured you and your brother, every birthday. The backyard where we had your wedding reception. She smiled faintly. I'm not ready to leave all that behind. Margaret reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. I understand, Mom. I do. I just want you to be safe. The conversation shifted to other topics: Margaret's husband's recent promotion, her youngest son's soccer tournament, the practice she shared with 3 other pediatricians. But Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely a temporary retreat in an ongoing campaign. After lunch, as Evelyn was preparing to leave, Margaret walked her to the door. 1 floor. Maintenance included. Security at the entrance. And it's only 15 minutes from us. Evelyn paused in the doorway. Margaret, we just discussed this. I know. I just thought you might want to look at it. No pressure. Margaret smiled, but her eyes held that determined gleam Evelyn recognized all too well. Think about it. For me? Tell Emma I'll pick her up Friday after school. The drive home took Evelyn through the familiar streets of Oak Ridge, the town where she'd lived for over 40 years. She passed the library where she still volunteered twice a week, the coffee shop where she met her book club, the park where she walked 3 mornings a week with her friend Diane. This was her community, her world. The idea of being uprooted to some sterile apartment complex, even one with activities and security, made her stomach clench. Her colonial-style home sat on a corner lot, its brick exterior weathered to a soft rose hue over the decades. The maple trees she and Robert had planted when they first moved in now towered over the front yard, creating dappled shade across the lawn. The garden she'd meticulously tended burst with late summer blooms: black-eyed Susans, purple coneflowers, and the hydrangeas Robert had loved. As she pulled into the driveway, she noticed George Miller from next door watering his roses. He waved, and she waved back, knowing he'd be over within the hour. Ostensibly to borrow sugar or ask about her garden, but really to check on her. At 72, George was a widower of 5 years who'd appointed himself her unofficial guardian, though she suspected his interest wasn't entirely neighborly. Inside, the house welcomed her with familiar creaks and sighs. Yes, it was too large for one person. Yes, the stairs could be challenging after a long day. But it was home in a way no apartment could ever be. Evelyn set her purse on the entryway table and glanced at the mail she'd collected earlier. Among the bills and advertisements was an official-looking envelope from the county assessor's office. She opened it, scanning the contents with growing dismay. Her property taxes had increased significantly. The letter explained something about reassessment values and neighborhood development, but the bottom line was clear: her annual property tax would increase by nearly $3,000. Evelyn sank into her favorite armchair, the letter clutched in her hand. On her fixed income, comfortable though it was, with Robert's pension and her retirement savings, this was a substantial hit, combined with the rising costs of home maintenance and utilities. "No," she said aloud to the empty room, "I am not going to let this be the thing that drives me out." But, as the afternoon wore on, Evelyn found herself walking through the rooms of her beloved home with new eyes. The master bedroom she and Robert had shared, now feeling too large with just her queen-sized bed. The guest rooms that sat empty most of the year. The formal dining room they'd used for holidays and special occasions, now gathering dust. When the doorbell rang at 5 o'clock, she wasn't surprised to find George standing there, a measuring cup in hand. "Hope I'm not disturbing you, Evelyn," he said, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Seems I've run out of sugar again." "Come in, George," she said, stepping aside. "I was just about to make some tea." In the kitchen, George settled at the table while Evelyn put the kettle on. They'd fallen into this routine over the past few years, casual visits that often stretched into dinner or an evening of television. "You look troubled," George observed as she set a mug of tea in front of him. "Everything okay with Margaret and the grandkids?" Evelyn sighed. "Margaret's fine. Still trying to move me into a retirement home." George snorted. "You? In one of those places? Ridiculous. You're more active than half the 40-year-olds I know." "Thank you for that." She smiled, then hesitated before adding, "But I did get some news today. My property taxes are going up substantially." "Ah." George nodded knowingly. "Got that letter myself last week." "Quite a shock, wasn't it?" "It's making me think," Evelyn admitted. "Not about a retirement home," she added quickly, seeing his expression, "but about whether this house still makes sense for me." George stirred his tea thoughtfully. "Been having similar thoughts myself. Helen and I bought that place for raising kids. Now it's just me rattling around in 4 bedrooms. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. Two aging homeowners contemplating the practicalities of their situations. "You know," George said finally, "my son keeps trying to get me to move closer to him in Arizona. Says I'd love the weather." "Would you? Love the weather, I mean?" George grimaced. "Can't stand the heat. And what would I do in Arizona? I don't know a soul there except David and his wife, who are both working all day." He took a sip of tea. "No, if I move, it'll be because it makes sense for me, not because my children think they know what's best." Evelyn felt a rush of affection for her gruff neighbor. "Exactly. That's exactly it." Later that evening, after George had gone home, with his sugar and half a casserole Evelyn insisted he take, she sat at her computer, researching property values in Oak Ridge. What she found surprised her. Her neighborhood, once solidly middle class, had become increasingly desirable. New families were moving in, attracted by the good schools and tree-lined streets. Homes were selling quickly, often above asking price. Out of curiosity, she looked up her own property on a real estate website. The estimated value made her eyebrows rise. If these numbers were accurate, her home had appreciated significantly since Robert's death. An idea began to form in Evelyn's mind, not fully shaped yet, more of an inkling. She opened a new browser tab and searched for something specific: single-story homes for sale in Oak Ridge. The results were limited, but interesting. There were a few ranch-style houses, some garden homes in newer developments, and this caught her attention: a charming craftsman bungalow just 3 streets over from Margaret's house. It had been renovated recently, featured a main floor master suite, and sat on a manageable lot with established gardens. Evelyn found herself clicking through the photos with growing interest. The kitchen had been updated with granite countertops and new appliances. The living room featured a gas fireplace. There was even a small guest suite for when Emma or her other grandchildren wanted to stay over. And the price, while not inexpensive, was actually less than what her current home might sell for, according to the estimates. Interesting, she murmured, bookmarking the listing. The next morning, Evelyn called her friend Diane, who had retired from real estate just 2 years ago. "I need your honest opinion," Evelyn said after explaining her situation. "Am I crazy to even consider moving?" "Not at all," Diane replied. "Many people downsize at our age. The question is whether you're doing it for the right reasons. Is this about making Margaret happy or making yourself happy?" "Definitely not about Margaret," Evelyn said firmly. "If anything, I'm considering this despite her, not because of her. She wants me in some sterile senior apartment where they'll monitor my medications and serve bland food in a communal dining room." Diane laughed. "That doesn't sound like you at all. But a smaller, more manageable home, still in your own community? That could make sense. Would you have time to look at a property with me? Just to explore the idea? We can go as soon as you'd like." 2 days later, Evelyn stood in the living room of the Craftsman bungalow, trying to imagine her furniture in the space. The house was even more charming in person, original woodwork restored to a warm glow, hardwood floors throughout, large windows that flooded the rooms with light. The previous owners did a complete renovation 2 years ago. The real estate agent, a young woman named Tara, explained. "New roof, updated electrical, high-efficiency furnace. They only moved because of a job transfer." Diane walked through the space with a professional eye. "Good flow. Nice updates while keeping the character. And that kitchen is gorgeous." Evelyn had to agree. The kitchen featured a center island with seating, perfect for when her grandchildren visited. The backyard was smaller than her current one but beautifully landscaped with a stone patio and raised garden beds. Tara led them down a short hallway. "Yes, it's actually a flexible space. Could be an office, den, or guest room." She opened a door to reveal a cozy room with an attached 3/4 bathroom. Previous owners used it as a home office, but it would make a perfect spot for grandchildren or visitors. As they continued the tour, Evelyn found herself mentally placing her favorite pieces throughout the house. Her antique secretary desk would fit perfectly in that corner. The painting she and Robert had bought on their 20th anniversary would look lovely above the fireplace. "What do you think?" Diane asked quietly, as Tara stepped away to take a phone call. "I think I could be happy here," Evelyn admitted. "It's smaller but not small. Manageable, but not confining." She glanced out the window and realized something she hadn't noticed from the listing photos. "And it's only 3 blocks from Margaret's house." Diane raised an eyebrow. "Is that a plus or a minus?" Evelyn laughed. "Both, probably. Close enough to see the grandchildren regularly, but not so close that Margaret can drop by unannounced too easily." When Tara returned, Evelyn asked several practical questions about the property taxes, reasonable, the neighborhood association, minimal restrictions, and recent comparable sales. Everything she heard reinforced her growing feeling that this might be the right move, a choice made on her own terms, for her own reasons. "I'd like to think about it," she told Tara. "But I'm definitely interested." "Of course," Tara replied. "Just be aware that properties in this neighborhood don't stay on the market long. This one just listed yesterday, and I already have another showing scheduled for this afternoon." On the drive home, Diane offered her professional assessment. "It's a fair price for what you're getting, especially with all the updates. And if your house sells for what we think it will, you could walk away with a nice chunk of change even after buying this one." "That's what I was thinking," Evelyn said. "I could boost my retirement savings, maybe even set up college funds for the grandkids." "So what's holding you back?" Diane asked perceptively. Evelyn sighed. "Memories, I suppose. Robert and I built a life in that house. The thought of leaving it feels like I'm leaving him behind somehow." Diane reached over and squeezed her friend's hand. "Robert isn't in that house, Evelyn. He's in your heart. He'd want you to do what's best for you now." "You're right," Evelyn said softly. "And I think he'd actually love that bungalow. Remember how he always said he wanted a craftsman-style house when we were first married?" but we couldn't afford it then. See? Maybe this is exactly what you both would have chosen at this stage of life. By the time Diane dropped her off, Evelyn had made her decision. She called Tara immediately and arranged to see the house again the next day, this time with a tape measure and notebook, to make sure her most treasured possessions would fit comfortably. What she hadn't decided was how to tell Margaret, or whether to tell her at all until everything was settled. The thought of her daughter's reaction, the smugness, the "I told you so," that would inevitably come when she learned Evelyn was selling her home made her stomach knot with irritation. But first things first. She needed to be sure this was what she wanted, independent of Margaret's opinions or her own stubbornness. This had to be a decision made from wisdom, not reaction. As she walked through her current home that evening, touching familiar surfaces and pausing by cherished photographs, Evelyn felt a surprising sense of peace settling over her. Change was coming, change of her own choosing. And somehow, that made all the difference. Evelyn hadn't intended to keep her house hunting a secret from Margaret, not exactly. But as the days passed, and her excitement about the craftsman bungalow grew, she found herself reluctant to share the news. She'd made an offer slightly below asking price, but with a quick closing timeline and it had been accepted with minimal negotiation. Now she was in that strange limbo of inspections and paperwork, the house not quite hers but no longer someone else's either. Friday afternoon arrived, and with it came Emma, backpack slung over one shoulder and phone clutched in her hand as Evelyn picked her up from school. "Thanks for rescuing me from Aunt Sarah's," Emma said, sliding into the passenger seat. "Mom said I had to bring homework, but I finished most of it already." "Smart girl," Evelyn replied with a smile. "I thought we might do something special this weekend if you're interested." Emma looked up from her phone. "Like what? Shopping?" "Not exactly. I wanted to show you something and get your opinion." Evelyn made a decision in that moment. Emma would be her first confidant. Before Margaret, before her son Thomas, who lived in Chicago, before anyone else, she would share her plans with her eldest grandchild. "My opinion?" Emma's eyebrows rose. "About what?" "You'll see. But first, let's stop for ice cream." At Molly's Ice Cream Parlor, a local institution that had been serving Oak Ridge for over 30 years, they settled into a booth with their treats, a hot fudge sundae for Emma and a single scoop of butter pecan for Evelyn. "So what's this mysterious thing you want my opinion on?" Emma asked, digging into her sundae. Evelyn took a small bite of ice cream, considering her words carefully. "I'm thinking about moving." Emma's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. "Moving? Like to Florida or something?" "No, nothing that dramatic. Just to a different house. A smaller one, all on one level, easier to maintain." "But you love your house," Emma said, confusion evident in her voice. "You always say it's full of memories." "I do love it," Evelyn acknowledged. "But houses are meant to serve the people who live in them, not the other way around. And I'm starting to think a different house might serve me better at this stage of my life." Emma seemed to consider this, stirring her melting ice cream thoughtfully. "Does Mom know?" "Not yet. I wanted to get your thoughts first." This clearly pleased Emma, who sat up straighter. "Really? Why me?" "Because you're observant and honest. And because I value your opinion." Emma beamed at the compliment. "So where is this new house? Can I see it?" "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd ask. It's not far from your house, actually. We can drive by after we finish our ice cream, if you'd like." "Definitely." Emma paused, then asked more cautiously, "Is this because Mom's been bugging you about moving to that old people place?" Evelyn couldn't help but laugh. "Golden Sunset, you mean?" "No. Though I won't deny your mother has been persistent about her concerns. But this is my decision, based on what makes sense for me." Emma nodded sagely. "Mom can be really pushy sometimes. She still treats me like I'm 10, not 15. Parents often have trouble adjusting to their children growing up," Evelyn said. "Just like children sometimes have trouble adjusting to their parents growing older." "But you're not old, Emma protested. "Not like nursing home old." Thank you for that ringing endorsement, Evelyn said dryly. I agree, which is why I'm looking at a regular house, not a retirement community. But I am 67, and looking ahead, I'd rather make changes on my own terms than be forced into them later. Emma considered this as she scraped the last of her sundae from the glass. That makes sense. Like being proactive instead of reactive, right? That's what my guidance counselor always says. Exactly right. Now, shall we go see this house? 20 minutes later, they parked across the street from the craftsman bungalow. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow on its warm brick exterior and sage green trim. This is it? Emma asked, peering through the car window. It's really pretty, Grandma. Let's get a closer look, Evelyn suggested, getting out of the car. They crossed the street and stood on the sidewalk, taking in the front garden with its neat boxwood hedges and flowering perennials. The current owners have already moved out, Evelyn explained. And my real estate agent gave me permission to show you the outside. We can't go in without her, though. Emma walked up the stone path to the wide front porch, running her hand along the substantial wooden railing. This porch is amazing. You could put your wicker chairs out here. How many bedrooms? Emma asked, practical even in her excitement. Emma's face lit up. So I could still stay over? Of course. That's important to me. Evelyn gestured toward the street. And look how close it is to your house. Just 3 blocks that way. Emma's eyes widened as she oriented herself. Wait, this is right near us. I could ride my bike over whenever I wanted. That's part of the appeal, Evelyn admitted. Being closer to family, but still having my own space. They walked around the perimeter of the property, Evelyn pointing out features she particularly liked: the side yard, with room for a small vegetable garden, the updated windows that would keep heating costs down, the attached garage that meant no more scraping ice in winter. I think it's perfect, Grandma, Emma declared as they completed their circuit. Way better than that depressing retirement place Mom keeps talking about. Evelyn laughed. I'm glad you approve. But now I need your advice on something else. How do you think I should tell your mother? Emma's expression turned serious. That's tricky. Mom's going to think she was right all along about you needing to move. Exactly my concern. But this is totally different from what she wants, Emma pointed out. She wants you in some supervised place where they check on you all the time. This is just a regular house that happens to be smaller and closer to us. True, but I'm not sure she'll see the distinction. Emma thought for a moment. Then her face brightened. I know, don't tell her you're moving until after you buy it. Then it's a done deal, and she can't try to change your mind. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. That seems a bit extreme. Trust me, Grandma. Once Mom gets an idea in her head, she doesn't let go. Remember when she decided Zach needed braces even though the first orthodontist said his teeth were fine? She took him to 3 more until she found one who agreed with her. Evelyn did remember, and the example gave her pause. Margaret's determination could be formidable. Once she learned Evelyn was selling her house, she would undoubtedly try to steer her toward Golden Sunset or someplace similar. I'm not suggesting you lie, Emma continued, seeing Evelyn's hesitation. Just wait to tell her until everything's finalized. Then invite her over for dinner and be like, surprise! I bought a new house, and it's right near you. Despite her reservations, Evelyn found herself warming to the idea. It wasn't about deceiving Margaret, but about maintaining control of her own decision-making process. If she announced her plans too early, she'd face weeks of Margaret's opinions, suggestions, and not-so-subtle attempts to redirect her. For now, let's keep this between us, okay? Emma mimed, zipping her lips. Your secret's safe with me, Grandma. As they drove back to Evelyn's house, she felt lighter than she had in months. The decision to move felt right, and sharing it with Emma had only reinforced that feeling. Her granddaughter's enthusiasm was contagious, untainted by the complicated dynamics that existed between Evelyn and Margaret. The weekend passed pleasantly, filled with cookie baking, classic movie watching, and long conversations where Emma shared her hopes for high school and beyond. Evelyn treasured these glimpses into her granddaughter's developing mind and personality, seeing echoes of both Margaret's determination and her own pragmatism. Sunday evening, when Margaret came to pick up Emma, Evelyn found it surprisingly difficult to maintain her composure. She felt like she was harboring a significant secret, which in a way, she was. "Did you have a good time?" Margaret asked Emma as she collected her backpack. "The best," Emma replied. "Grandma and I watched old movies and talked about all kinds of stuff." "That sounds nice," Margaret said, then turned to Evelyn. "Thanks for taking her, Mom. I hope she wasn't too much trouble." "Emma is never trouble," Evelyn said firmly. "She's welcome any time." After they left, Evelyn sat in her quiet living room, looking around at the space that had been her home for so many years. She tried to imagine strangers living here, a young family perhaps, bringing new life and creating their own memories within these walls. The thought brought a surprising sense of continuity, rather than loss. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. The inspection on the bungalow revealed only minor issues, which the sellers agreed to address. Evelyn's mortgage was approved quickly, thanks to her excellent credit and the substantial down payment she planned to make. A closing date was set for the end of the month. Meanwhile, she began the process of preparing her current home for sale. Diane connected her with a respected real estate agent who specialized in her neighborhood. Together, they walked through the house, identifying small updates that would maximize its appeal: fresh paint in the entry hall, new fixtures in the guest bathroom, professional cleaning of the carpets. "The market is strong right now," the agent, Brenda, assured her. "With minimal staging and these few updates, I think we can list at the top of the range I mentioned." Evelyn also started the daunting task of sorting through 40 years of accumulated possessions. Some decisions were easy: kitchen gadgets she never used, clothes she hadn't worn in years, duplicate tools and household items. Others were agonizingly difficult: which of Robert's books to keep, which photographs to display in a smaller space, which pieces of furniture would fit in the new house. Through it all, she maintained her regular routines: volunteering at the library, meeting friends for coffee, her morning walks with Diane. And she kept her plans private from everyone except Emma, Diane, and George, who had become an unexpected source of support and practical help. "I've been thinking about what you're doing," George told her one evening as they sat on her patio, watching the sunset. "Making a change on your own terms, before circumstances force your hand. It's smart, brave, too." "I don't feel particularly brave," Evelyn admitted. "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night wondering if I'm making a terrible mistake." "That's normal," George assured her. "Change is always scary, even good change. But from what you've told me about this bungalow, it sounds perfect for you." "It is," Evelyn said, surprised by the certainty in her voice. "It really is." George hesitated, then asked, "Have you told Margaret yet?" Evelyn sighed. "No. And I'm starting to feel guilty about that. She's coming for dinner tomorrow night, and I know I should tell her then. But I'm dreading it." "Because she'll try to talk you out of it?" "Because she'll think this proves she was right all along, that I couldn't handle living in this house anymore. She won't understand that this is my choice, not something I'm being forced into." George nodded thoughtfully. "Children often have trouble seeing their parents as autonomous beings with their own minds. My David's the same way, always thinking he knows what's best for me." "Exactly," Evelyn said, grateful for his understanding. "And the irony is, I'm moving closer to her, which is what she wanted, but not in the way she wanted it." "Well," George said, rising to leave, "whatever you decide about telling her, just remember it's your life. You don't need her permission or approval." His words stayed with Evelyn as she prepared for Margaret's visit the next evening. She'd decided to make Robert's favorite pot roast, a meal that always reminded both her and Margaret of family dinners when the children were young. Perhaps the nostalgic atmosphere would soften whatever reaction might come. Margaret arrived precisely at 6:30, bringing a bottle of wine and a folder tucked under her arm that immediately put Evelyn on alert. "Something smells wonderful," Margaret said, kissing her mother's cheek. "Is that Dad's pot roast?" "It is," Evelyn confirmed, taking the wine. I thought we'd eat in the dining room tonight. Margaret looked surprised but pleased. Special occasion? Just felt like making an effort, Evelyn said lightly, leading the way to the kitchen. How are things at the practice? For the next 20 minutes, as Evelyn finished preparing the meal, Margaret talked about her patients, her partners, and the challenges of modern pediatric practice. Evelyn listened with genuine interest, proud of her daughter's professional accomplishments even as she braced herself for the conversation to come. Over dinner, they discussed the children, Margaret's husband's recent business trip, and an upcoming family wedding. The folder Margaret had brought remained unopened beside her plate, like a silent third presence at the table. Finally, as Evelyn served coffee and the apple crisp she'd made for dessert, Margaret reached for the folder. Mom, I've been doing some research, she began, her tone shifting to what Evelyn thought of as her doctor voice, authoritative, slightly patronizing, about housing options for seniors who want to maintain their independence while having appropriate support systems. Evelyn took a deliberate bite of her dessert, chewing slowly before responding. That's thoughtful of you, Margaret. Encouraged by this mild response, Margaret opened the folder and withdrew several glossy brochures. Golden Sunset is still my first choice for you. They have an excellent reputation and a wait list, so we'd need to get your name on it soon. But I found 2 other communities that might work as well. She spread the brochures across the table, pointing out features of each community: dining rooms, activity calendars, transportation services, emergency call buttons in every apartment. Evelyn looked at the smiling seniors pictured on the brochures playing cards, exercising in a pool, painting in an art class. They all looked content, engaged, safe, and utterly unlike how she saw herself. These all look very nice, she said carefully. But they're not for me, Margaret. Margaret's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Mom, I know change is difficult to contemplate, but living alone in this big house just isn't practical anymore. I agree, Evelyn said, deciding the moment had come. That's why I'm moving. Margaret's eyes widened in surprise, then relief washed over her face. Oh, Mom, that's wonderful. I didn't think you'd come around so quickly. Which one appeals to you most? Golden Sunset has the nicest apartments, but Lakeside Gardens has that beautiful walking path. I'm not moving to a retirement community. Evelyn interrupted gently. I'm buying a house, a smaller one, all on one level, easier to maintain, and it's just 3 blocks from you. Margaret stared at her, confusion replacing relief. A house. But what about security, maintenance, emergency response? And I'll keep wearing this. Evelyn held up her wrist with the medical alert bracelet. Plus, I'll be close enough that if there ever is an emergency, help will be minutes away. I don't understand, Margaret said, her voice rising slightly. When did you decide this? Why didn't you talk to me first? And there it was, the assumption that Evelyn needed Margaret's input, approval, or permission to make decisions about her own life. I've been considering it for a few weeks, Evelyn said calmly. The property taxes on this house are increasing substantially, and it makes sense to downsize. I found a lovely craftsman bungalow that suits my needs perfectly. A few weeks? Margaret repeated. You've been house hunting for weeks and never mentioned it? I wanted to be sure of my decision before discussing it, Evelyn explained, maintaining her composure despite the hurt and anger flashing in her daughter's eyes. Does Thomas know about this? Margaret pushed her dessert away untouched. So I'm the last to know? Your own daughter? Emma knows, Evelyn admitted. She helped me think through how to tell you. Emma? Margaret's voice rose further. My 15-year-old daughter knew about this major life decision before I did? Evelyn took a deep breath. Margaret, I understand you're upset, but this is my decision to make. I value your concern, but I don't need your permission. It's not about permission, Margaret protested. It's about being included in important decisions that affect our family. Of course I want you closer, Margaret said, but in a proper senior living environment, not alone in another house where anything could happen. Nothing is going to happen, Evelyn said, her patience beginning to fray. I'm healthy, active, and perfectly capable of living independently. For now, Margaret countered. But what about in 5 years? 10? Will you move again when that house becomes too much? The question struck Evelyn as particularly unfair. None of us knows what the future holds. I'm making the best decision for my current circumstances, with an eye toward the coming years. That's all any of us can do. Margaret gathered her brochures, shoving them back into the folder with unnecessary force. I think you're making a mistake. These communities offer so much more than just housing. They provide community, activities, healthcare monitoring. I have a community, Evelyn interrupted. I have activities I enjoy, and I have a doctor I see regularly. What these places offer is supervision and loss of autonomy, which I neither need nor want. They stared at each other across the table, the remains of their dessert forgotten. Evelyn saw the genuine concern in her daughter's eyes, but also the stubborn certainty that she knew best, a trait Margaret had possessed since childhood. The house is in escrow, Evelyn said finally, softening her tone. The inspection is complete, and I close at the end of the month. I'd love for you to see it before then. I think you'll understand why it appeals to me once you do. Margaret stood, tucking the folder under her arm. I need to get home. Jack's flying back tonight, and I want to be there when he arrives. Margaret, Evelyn began, rising as well. We'll talk later, Mom, Margaret said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. I need to process this. Evelyn walked her to the door in silence, unsure whether to push for resolution or give her daughter space. At the threshold, Margaret turned, her expression troubled. I only want what's best for you, she said quietly. You know that, right? I know, Evelyn assured her, and I appreciate that, but I'm the one who gets to decide what best means for me. Margaret nodded stiffly, then leaned in to give her mother a quick, perfunctory hug before leaving. Evelyn closed the door behind her, leaning against it with a heavy sigh. The conversation had gone about as well as she'd expected, which was to say, not well at all. But at least everything was out in the open now. No more secrets, no more avoiding the subject. As she cleared the dinner dishes, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Emma. Did you tell Mom yet? How did it go? Evelyn smiled despite her weariness. I told her, she typed back. She's not thrilled, but she'll come around. Thank you for your support. Emma's response came seconds later. Always on your side, Grandma. Can't wait to help you decorate the new place. The simple message lifted Evelyn's spirits. Whatever tension existed between her and Margaret, the bond with her granddaughter remained strong and uncomplicated. And perhaps, in time, Margaret would come to understand and accept Evelyn's decision. For now, though, Evelyn had a house to sell, another to buy, and 40 years of possessions to sort through. The path ahead would not be easy, but it was hers to walk in her own terms, at her own pace, toward a future of her own choosing. The week after her dinner with Margaret passed in tense silence. No calls, no texts, not even the usual family updates that Margaret typically shared throughout the week. Evelyn refused to be the first to reach out. This was a pattern they'd established years ago. Margaret would withdraw when upset, expecting Evelyn to pursue reconciliation. But this time felt different. This time, Evelyn stood firmly by her decision, unwilling to apologize for taking control of her own life. Instead, she channeled her energy into preparations for both selling her current home and purchasing the bungalow. The closing date was set for the 28th, just 2 weeks away. Her real estate agent, Brenda, had arranged for a professional stager to come through the house, making recommendations for how to present it most effectively to potential buyers. The market is hot right now, Brenda assured her as they walked through the living room. With your location and the condition of your home, I expect multiple offers, possibly above asking price. That would be wonderful, Evelyn said, trying to focus on the practical aspects of the conversation rather than the emotional weight of selling the home where she'd raised her family. The stager suggests removing about a third of your furniture to make the rooms appear larger, Brenda continued. And personal photographs should be minimized. We want buyers to envision themselves living here, not feel like they're intruding on someone else's space. Evelyn nodded, though the idea of taking down family photos felt like another small loss. I understand. I've already started packing some things for storage. Perfect. Now, we should discuss timing. I'd like to list the property next Thursday, with an open house that weekend. How does that sound? That works, Evelyn agreed. I can stay with a friend during the open house. After Brenda left, Evelyn stood in her living room, looking at the spaces where furniture would be removed, the walls where family photographs would come down. The house already felt less like hers, transitioning to something more generic, more marketable. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, half expecting it to be Margaret, but the caller ID showed Thomas's name instead. "Hello, Thomas," she answered, genuinely pleased to hear from her son. "Hi, Mom," came his warm voice. "How are you doing?" "I'm well. Busy with house preparations, but good. How are things in Chicago?" There was a slight pause before Thomas replied. "Things are fine here. Listen, Mom, I got a call from Margaret last night." Evelyn sighed. Of course Margaret had called her brother. "I see. And what did your sister have to say?" "She's worried about you. Says you're selling the house and buying some other place without consulting anyone." "That's not entirely accurate," Evelyn said carefully. "I am selling the house and buying a smaller one. But I didn't make the decision impulsively. And I did consult with friends who have expertise in real estate." "But you didn't talk to Margaret or me," Thomas pointed out. "Don't you think that's something you might have mentioned to your children?" Evelyn felt a flicker of irritation. Thomas lived 800 miles away and visited twice a year at most. While they maintained a good relationship, he was hardly involved in her day-to-day life. "Thomas, I love you and Margaret very much, but I'm a grown woman, making a sensible decision about my own living situation. I didn't realize I needed to clear it with my adult children first." Another pause, longer this time. "It's not about clearing it with us, Mom. It's about including us in important decisions. Margaret says this house you're buying isn't in a senior community. Are you sure that's wise?" "Yes, I'm sure," Evelyn said firmly. "It's a lovely single-story home just 3 blocks from Margaret's house. It's more manageable than this place but still allows me to maintain my independence." "But what about security? And what if you fall or get sick?" "I'm not isolated or helpless, Thomas." "I know you're not helpless," Thomas backpedaled. It's a big change. And Margaret feels blindsided." "I understand that," Evelyn acknowledged. "Perhaps I should have told her sooner. But frankly, I was concerned she would try to pressure me into one of those retirement communities she keeps leaving brochures for." "Would that be so terrible?" Thomas asked. "Those places offer a lot of amenities and support." "They're not for me," Evelyn said simply. "I value my privacy and independence too much, and I'm not ready to live exclusively among people my age, with scheduled activities and communal dining." Thomas sighed audibly. "I get it, Mom. I do. I just wish you'd included us in the process." "I'm including you now," Evelyn offered. "I'd love for you to see the new house next time you visit. It has a lovely guest room that will be perfect when you come to stay." This seemed to mollify him somewhat. "I was actually thinking of coming out for a long weekend soon. Maybe in a couple of weeks?" "I'd like that," Evelyn said sincerely. "The closing is on the 28th. Why don't you come the weekend after? You can help me christen the new place." They chatted a bit longer about Thomas's work, his girlfriend Melissa, and plans for his visit. By the time they hung up, the conversation had returned to its usual warmth, though Evelyn sensed her son was still uncertain about her decision. She put down the phone, feeling both relieved and troubled. Thomas, at least, seemed willing to accept her choice, even if he didn't fully understand it. Margaret would be harder to convince. As if summoned by her thoughts, her phone buzzed with a text message from her daughter. "Emma wants to come over tomorrow to help you pack. Okay if I drop her off around 10? The message was cool, businesslike, but at least it was communication. Evelyn quickly replied, "That would be wonderful. Thank you." The next morning, Margaret's car pulled into the driveway precisely at 10. Emma bounded out immediately, a box of donuts in hand. Margaret followed more slowly, her expression carefully neutral as she approached the front door. "Good morning," Evelyn greeted them both, giving Emma a warm hug and meeting Margaret's eyes with a tentative smile. "Hi, Grandma. I brought sustenance for our packing marathon," Emma announced, holding up the donut box. "Where do we start?" "I thought we'd begin with the bookshelves in the living room," Evelyn said. "I've got boxes and packing materials all ready." Margaret hovered in the doorway, clearly uncertain about her role. "Do you need me to stay and help too? I have a few hours before my afternoon appointments." Evelyn hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, to maintain the distance Margaret had established over the past week. But another part recognized this as an olive branch, however small. "We could use the help," she said finally. "3 pairs of hands are better than 2. Margaret nodded and stepped fully into the house, closing the door behind her. "Just tell me what to do." For the next 2 hours, they worked together sorting through books, deciding which would go to the new house, which to storage, and which to donate. The task created a natural buffer for conversation, allowing them to interact without directly addressing the tension between them. Emma, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrents, chattered happily about school, friends, and her ideas for decorating Evelyn's new guest room. "I'm thinking maybe a blue and white theme? Like beach colors? Since that's where we go every summer." "That sounds lovely," Evelyn agreed, carefully wrapping a first edition novel Robert had given her for their 25th anniversary. "Mom, did Grandma tell you the new house is just 3 blocks from us?" Emma asked, turning to Margaret. "I can ride my bike over whenever I want." Margaret's hands stilled on the book she was packing. "She mentioned it was close," she said carefully. "That will be convenient." "It's one of the main reasons I chose it," Evelyn said, seizing the opening. "Being near family is important to me." Margaret met her eyes briefly, then looked away. "I appreciate that." It wasn't much, but it was something in acknowledgement, at least, of the positive aspects of Evelyn's decision. As they broke for lunch, enjoying the donuts Emma had brought along with some fruit Evelyn provided for balance, the atmosphere had lightened somewhat. They sat around the kitchen table, surrounded by the partially packed boxes that represented Evelyn's transition. "When do you close on the new house?" Margaret asked, her first direct question about the purchase. "The 28th, Evelyn replied. "Thomas is coming out the weekend after to see it." "Thomas knows?" Margaret's tone sharpened slightly. "I told him when he called yesterday," Evelyn explained. "After you spoke with him." Margaret had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I was concerned." "I know you were," Evelyn said gently. "And I understand why. But Margaret, you need to trust that I know what I'm doing. This move makes sense for me financially, practically, and emotionally." Margaret studied her coffee cup intently. "I just don't want you to be alone if something happens. I'll have neighbors and friends nearby. And I'll have the security of knowing I'm in a home I can manage comfortably for many years to come." Emma, who had been following this exchange with unusual quietness, suddenly spoke up. "Mom, you should see the new house. It's really nice, and it has this awesome front porch where Grandma can sit and watch the neighborhood. Way better than some apartment in a building full of old people." Margaret raised an eyebrow at her daughter's blunt assessment, but didn't contradict her. "Perhaps I should see it," she conceded. "If that's all right with you, Mom." "I'd like that very much," Evelyn said, feeling a small knot of tension release in her chest. "I have a final walk through scheduled for Monday. Would you like to join me?" Margaret nodded. "I could come during my lunch break." "Perfect." Evelyn smiled, genuinely pleased by this small step toward reconciliation. The weekend passed in a blur of packing, sorting, and organizing. George came over both days to help with some of the heavier items and to assist with dismantling shelving units that wouldn't be making the move. Diane stopped by with coffee and moral support, helping Evelyn make decisions about which kitchen items to keep and which to donate. By Sunday evening, Evelyn's house had been transformed. Many personal items were packed away. Furniture had been rearranged or removed to create a more spacious feel, and the walls bore rectangles of unfaded paint where family photographs had hung for decades. "It doesn't even look like my house anymore," Evelyn remarked to George as they sat on the patio, resting after a long day of work. "That's the point, isn't it?" he replied pragmatically. "Makes it easier to let go when it already feels less like yours." "I suppose you're right," she agreed. "Still, it's strange to see 40 years of life packed into boxes." George nodded thoughtfully. "Helen always said houses are just containers for living. It's the life that matters, not the container." "Your wife sounds like she was a wise woman," Evelyn said. "The wisest," George confirmed with a sad smile. "She'd approve of what you're doing, you know. Taking charge, making your own decisions." Monday morning dawned bright and clear. Evelyn dressed with particular care for the final walkthrough, choosing a blue dress that Robert had always liked, and a simple pearl necklace he'd given her for their 30th anniversary. She wanted to look her best when Margaret saw the bungalow for the first time. Tara, her real estate agent, met her at the property at 11:30. "Everything looks great," she assured Evelyn as they walked through the empty rooms. "The sellers have completed all the agreed-upon repairs, and the cleaning crew did an excellent job." Evelyn moved from room to room, envisioning her furniture in the spaces, imagining the life she would build here. The morning light streamed through the large windows, highlighting the beautiful woodwork and gleaming hardwood floors. It felt right. It felt like a place where she could start a new chapter. At precisely noon, Margaret's car pulled into the driveway. Evelyn watched through the front window as her daughter sat for a moment, seemingly gathering herself before getting out and approaching the house. "That's my daughter," Evelyn explained to Tara. "She's joining us for the walkthrough." Tara nodded understandingly. Family support is wonderful during transitions like this. Evelyn opened the front door before Margaret could knock. "Welcome," she said simply, stepping aside to let her daughter enter. Margaret stepped into the foyer, her eyes taking in the craftsman details, the built-in bench with storage beneath, the leaded glass accents in the front door, the warm wood tones throughout. "It's not what I expected," she admitted, moving further into the house. "What did you expect?" Evelyn asked, genuinely curious. Margaret shrugged slightly. "Something more. I don't know. Generic? This has character." "That's what attracted me to it," Evelyn said, pleased by her daughter's observation. "It reminds me a bit of the house your father and I had when we were first married, the one in Minneapolis, before you were born." Margaret's expression softened at the mention of her father. "I remember seeing pictures. It did have similar features." Tara discreetly excused herself to make a phone call, giving mother and daughter some privacy as they continued through the house. Evelyn led Margaret through the living room with its gas fireplace, the updated kitchen with its center island, the dining area with built-in china cabinets. She showed her the master bedroom with its adjacent bathroom, the second bedroom she planned to use as a combination guest room and office, and the smaller third bedroom that would become storage and a crafting space. "And this bathroom will be primarily for guests," she explained, showing Margaret the updated hall bath with its pedestal sink and subway tile. "I thought Emma might like the shower better than the one in my bathroom, which only has a tub." Margaret ran her hand along the bathroom's marble countertop. "This is all very nice," she said, sounding almost surprised. "Much nicer than I imagined." "What did you imagine?" Evelyn asked again. Margaret hesitated. "I guess I thought you were downsizing to something more basic, a small ranch house or a condo. This is beautiful." "Thank you," Evelyn said simply. "I wanted a place that felt like home, not just a practical solution." They moved to the backyard, where a stone patio extended from the kitchen's French doors. The yard was smaller than Evelyn's current one, but beautifully landscaped with mature shrubs and perennial beds. "I can picture you out here with your morning coffee," Margaret said, looking around the peaceful space. "It's very you." Evelyn felt a surge of hope at these words. the first indication that Margaret was seeing this move as a positive choice rather than a concerning development. "And it's only 3 blocks from your house," Evelyn reminded her. "Emma's already talking about riding her bike over." "Yes, she mentioned that. Several times." Margaret's lips quirked in a small smile. "She's quite excited about having you so close." "And how do you feel about it?" Evelyn asked directly. Margaret took a deep breath. "Honestly, I'm still processing everything. This isn't what I envisioned for you at this stage of life. But," she added quickly, seeing Evelyn's expression, "I can see why this appeals to you. It's a lovely home." It wasn't a full endorsement, but it was progress. Evelyn decided to accept it as such. "Thank you for coming to see it," she said. "It means a lot to me that you're here." Margaret nodded, then checked her watch. "I should get back to the office. I have a patient at 1. As they walked back through the house toward the front door, Margaret paused in the living room, looking around once more. "Dad would have loved this place," she said quietly. "Especially all the woodwork." Evelyn felt tears prick at her eyes. "That's exactly what I thought when I first saw it." For a moment, they stood together in silent remembrance of Robert, whose absence was still felt so keenly by both of them. Then Margaret surprised Evelyn by reaching out and squeezing her hand briefly. "It's a good choice, Mom," she said, her voice low but sincere. "I can see that now." The simple statement, offered without qualifications or concerns, felt like a gift. "Thank you, Margaret. That means everything to me." After Margaret left, Tara rejoined Evelyn in the living room. "Everything still looking good?" she asked brightly. "Perfect," Evelyn confirmed. "I can't wait for it to be officially mine." The next 10 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Evelyn's house went on the market and, as Brenda had predicted, attracted multiple offers within the first weekend. She accepted one that was $15,000 above asking price, with a flexible closing date that aligned well with her purchase of the bungalow. The packing continued, with Emma coming over after school several days to help. Margaret stopped by twice more, each visit less tense than the last. She even brought over several boxes from her own basement items of Evelyn's that she'd been storing for years. "I found these when we were reorganizing last fall," Margaret explained, setting the boxes on Evelyn's dining room table. "I thought you might want to go through them before deciding what to keep for the new house." Curious, Evelyn opened the top box to find photo albums from the years before her children were born, pictures of her and Robert as newlyweds, their first apartment, vacations they'd taken when they were young and broke, splurging on experiences rather than accommodations. "Oh my," she breathed, lifting out an album with a faded blue cover. "I haven't seen these in years. I thought they were lost in our move from Minneapolis." Margaret sat down beside her as Evelyn opened the album. "I found them when we cleaned out Dad's study after he died. I meant to give them back to you then, but it seemed like it might be too painful." Evelyn turned the pages slowly, taking in the images of her younger self and Robert so young, so full of plans and dreams. "Look at us," she said softly. "Barely more than children ourselves." "Dad's hair," Margaret marveled, pointing to a photo of Robert with shoulder-length locks and sideburns. "I can't believe he ever looked like that." "It was the 70s, Evelyn laughed. "Everyone looked like that." They spent the next hour going through the albums together, Evelyn sharing stories Margaret had never heard about her parents' early year show they'd met at a protest against the Vietnam War, their cross-country road trip in a Volkswagen van that broke down in Wyoming, the tiny first apartment where the bathtub was in the kitchen. "I knew some of this," Margaret said, "but not all the details. You and Dad never talked much about your life before us kids." "I suppose we were always so focused on the present," Evelyn reflected. "And then once you and Thomas came along, our past seemed less important than your future." Margaret touched a photo of Evelyn standing in front of a small bungalow, similar in style to the one she was purchasing. "Is this our first house?" "Yes," Evelyn confirmed. "In Minneapolis, before your father got the job offer that brought us here. We loved that little house. It was tiny but so charming." "So the new house really is like coming full circle for you," Margaret observed. Evelyn hadn't thought of it quite that way, but the observation resonated. I suppose it is, starting and ending with a bungalow. Not ending, Margaret corrected quickly. Just continuing in a new space. Evelyn smiled at her daughter, touched by the sentiment. Yes, continuing, that's a better way to think of it. As they reached the end of the second album, Margaret hesitated, then asked, Mom, can I ask you something? And will you promise not to be offended? Evelyn felt a flicker of apprehension but nodded. Of course. Are you selling this house because of money? Because if you are, Jack and I could help. We've talked about it and we'd be happy to. No, Evelyn interrupted gently. It's not about money. Yes, the property taxes are increasing, and yes, maintaining this house is expensive. But I could manage if I wanted to. This is about making a choice that feels right for this stage of my life. But why now? Margaret persisted. What changed? Evelyn considered the question carefully. Nothing changed dramatically, but after your father died, this house started to feel different. Too big, too full of echoes. And then when you started suggesting I might need to move eventually, it made me think about what I really want for the next chapter of my life. So it is my fault, Margaret said, looking stricken. Not at all, Evelyn assured her. You helped me start thinking about the future, that's all. But the decision to move and where to move was entirely mine, and it's the right one for me. Margaret seemed to accept this, though Evelyn could see she was still processing everything. They returned to the photo albums, the conversation shifting to lighter topics as they reminisced about family vacations and holiday celebrations captured in the images. If that's okay? I'd like that very much, Evelyn said sincerely. As the closing date approached, Evelyn found herself increasingly caught between excitement for her new beginning and nostalgia for the home she was leaving behind. Each room held memories, some joyous, some painful, all part of the tapestry of her life with Robert and their children. The night before the closing, she walked through the nearly empty house, saying goodbye to each space. In the kitchen, she remembered countless family meals, holiday preparations, late-night conversations with Robert over cups of tea. In the living room, Christmas mornings, movie nights, the hospital bed where Robert had spent his final weeks, insisting on being at home rather than in a sterile medical facility. Upstairs, she paused in what had been Margaret's bedroom, recalling a teenage girl with big dreams and strong opinions. In Thomas's room, she remembered a quiet boy who built elaborate structures with blocks and later became an architect, designing buildings that would long outlast him. In the master bedroom, she stood for a long time, remembering the life she and Robert had shared there, the love, the arguments, the reconciliations, the quiet conversations in the dark about their hopes and fears. I'm doing the right thing, she said aloud to the empty room. Aren't I, Robert? No answer came, of course, but as she stood there in the gathering dusk, Evelyn felt a sense of peace settle over her. This house had served its purpose beautifully, sheltering her family through decades of living. Now it would do the same for someone else, while she moved forward into a future of her own choosing. Tomorrow, she would sign the papers that would make the bungalow officially hers. A new home, a new beginning, but carrying forward all the wisdom and memories of the life she'd lived so far. Not an ending, as Margaret had started to say, but a continuation on her own terms, in her own way. The morning of the closing dawned clear and bright, as if the universe itself approved of Evelyn's decision. She dressed carefully in a tailored navy pantsuit that made her feel both professional and confident, appropriate attire for the significant transaction ahead. Diane arrived at 9 to drive her to the title company, insisting on accompanying her friend for moral support. This is a big day, she declared, as Evelyn slid into the passenger seat. We should celebrate afterward. Lunch at Vincenzo's? That sounds lovely, Evelyn agreed, though her stomach fluttered with too many emotions to feel particularly hungry. Excitement, anxiety, nostalgia, anticipation all swirled together as they drove through the familiar streets of Oak Ridge. The closing process itself was surprisingly anticlimactic, a series of signatures on documents, explained in technical language by the closing agent, the exchange of certified checks, and finally, the moment when the keys to the bungalow were placed in Evelyn's palm. "Congratulations, Mrs. Harrington," the agent said warmly. "The property is officially yours." Evelyn closed her fingers around the keys, feeling their weight both literal and symbolic. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier than she'd expected. As they left the title company, Diane squeezed her arm. "How does it feel to be a new homeowner?" "Surreal," Evelyn admitted. "Exciting and terrifying all at once." "That's how all the best decisions feel," Diane assured her. "Now, about that celebratory lunch." They were halfway through their meal at Vincenzo's, Evelyn's favorite Italian restaurant, when her phone buzzed with a text message from Margaret. "How did it go? Everything finalized?" Evelyn smiled at the message, appreciating that her daughter had remembered the closing was today. "All done," she typed back. "I'm officially the owner of 342 Maple Street." Margaret's response came quickly. "Congratulations, Mom. We're all looking forward to helping you move in this weekend." The simple message, free of qualifications or concerns, felt like another small step in their healing process. Margaret had come to accept, if not fully embrace, Evelyn's decision. It was progress. The next few days passed in a blur of final packing and preparations. The movers were scheduled for Saturday morning, giving Evelyn one last night in the home she'd shared with Robert for so many years. She'd decided to spend it alone, despite offers from both Diane and George to keep her company. "I need to say my goodbyes privately," she explained when George pressed her. "It's something I have to do on my own." That final evening, after the last box was taped shut and labeled, Evelyn walked through the empty rooms one more time. Most of the furniture had already been moved to the bungalow or put in storage. What remained were just the essentials she'd need for one more night: their bed, a bedside table, a single chair in the kitchen. The house echoed with her footsteps, the bareness of the walls and floors amplifying every sound. It felt both familiar and strange, like seeing a loved one's face altered by illness, recognizable but fundamentally changed. In the master bedroom, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the quilt her mother had made for her wedding, one of the few items she'd left unpacked until the very end. "Well, Robert," she said softly to the empty room, "we had a good run here, didn't we? Raised two wonderful children, hosted countless holidays, weathered our share of storms." She paused, feeling the familiar ache of his absence. "I hope you understand why I'm leaving. It's not about forgetting, it's about moving forward." No answer came, of course, but as she sat in the gathering dusk, Evelyn felt a sense of peace settle over her. The memories would go with her, carried in her heart rather than tied to these particular walls and floors. She slept surprisingly well that night, waking refreshed and ready for the day ahead. The movers arrived promptly at 8, efficient men who treated her possessions with care and respect. Margaret, Jack, and all 3 grandchildren appeared shortly after, ready to help with the smaller, more personal items Evelyn preferred to transport herself. "Grandma, can I help carry your jewelry box?" Emma asked, eager to be entrusted with something precious. "Of course." Evelyn smiled, handing over the wooden box Robert had given her on their 5th anniversary. "It goes in the front seat of my car, where I can keep an eye on it." By noon, the movers had emptied the house of everything that was going to the bungalow. The remaining items, furniture and boxes, designated for storage, would be picked up Monday by a different company. "Ready for the big reveal?" Margaret asked, dangling her car keys. "The boys and I will meet you there. Emma can ride with you if you'd like." "Perfect," Evelyn agreed, grateful for her granddaughter's company on this momentous drive. As they pulled away from the curb, Evelyn allowed herself one last look at the colonial that had been her home for 4 decades. The for sale sign now sported a bright red sold sticker across it. Soon another family would build their own memories within those walls. "Are you sad, Grandma?" Emma asked, noticing her wistful expression. "A little," Evelyn admitted. "But mostly, I'm looking forward to what comes next. Emma nodded sagely. Mom says change is hard but necessary. Like when I had to switch dance studios last year because Miss Jen moved to Colorado. I was super upset at first, but then I met Miss Alicia, and she's actually a way better teacher. Evelyn smiled at her granddaughter's perspective. That's very wise, Emma. Sometimes, what seems like an unwelcome change turns out to be exactly what we need. When they arrived at the bungalow, Evelyn reminded herself the mover's truck was already parked in the driveway. Margaret, Jack, and the boys stood on the front porch, waiting. "Welcome home, Mom," Margaret called as Evelyn, and Emma walked up the stone path. The simple phrase, spoken with genuine warmth, brought unexpected tears to Evelyn's eyes. "Thank you," she managed, fumbling slightly with the new keys. Inside, organized chaos reigned as the movers brought in furniture and boxes, looking to Evelyn for direction on where each item should go. Despite careful planning and labeled floor plans, there were countless small decisions to be made: the exact placement of the sofa, which kitchen cabinet should hold the everyday dishes, how to arrange the bedroom furniture to best advantage. Throughout it all, her family worked alongside her, offering suggestions but ultimately deferring to her preferences. Even 12-year-old Zachary and 9-year-old Lucas pitched in, unpacking books and arranging them on shelves with surprising care. By late afternoon, the major furniture was in place, the kitchen essentials unpacked, and Evelyn's bedroom set up completely. The movers departed with generous tips, leaving the family to continue the settling-in process at a more leisurely pace. "I think this calls for pizza," Jack announced, pulling out his phone. "My treat." No one objected to this plan. They gathered around the kitchen island, Evelyn's favorite feature of her new home, drinking cold sodas and planning which areas to tackle next. "The guest room needs to be functional by next weekend," Evelyn reminded them. "Thomas arrives Friday evening." "We'll get it ready," Margaret promised. "Emma and I can come over after school on Wednesday to set it up." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow through the west-facing windows, Evelyn felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. This house, with its warm wood tones and craftsman details, already felt like home in a way she hadn't expected so soon. Later, after her family had departed with promises to return the next day, Evelyn sat alone on her front porch, a cup of tea warming her hands in the cool evening air. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, with just the occasional dog walker passing by. Several had waved or called greetings, welcoming her to the street. From this vantage point, she could see 3 blocks down to the corner where Margaret's street began. Close enough for regular visits, but far enough for privacy and independence. Perfect. The sound of footsteps on the sidewalk drew her attention. George Miller approached, a potted plant in his hands. "Housewarming gift," he explained, setting the lush green fern on the porch beside her. "Every new home needs something living in it," my Helen always said. "It's beautiful," Evelyn said, genuinely touched. "Thank you, George. Would you like to come in for a tour?" "If you're not too tired," he said, though his eager expression belied his considerate words. Evelyn led him through her new home, now partially settled with her familiar possessions. George admired the craftsmanship, the updates, and especially the kitchen with its center island and modern appliances. "This suits you," he declared as they completed the tour. "It has character, like you do." "That's exactly what I thought when I first saw it," Evelyn agreed. "It felt right from the beginning." They settled on the porch again, George declining tea but accepting a glass of wine from a bottle Margaret had brought as her own housewarming gift. "To new beginnings," George proposed, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," Evelyn echoed, clinking her glass against his. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching the last light fade from the sky. Finally, George cleared his throat. "I have some news of my own," he said, his tone carefully casual. "I've decided to sell my house too." Evelyn turned to him in surprise. "You have? When did you decide this?" "Been thinking about it since you first mentioned moving," he admitted. "Watching you go through the process made me realize it's time for me too. That place is too big for just me, and the maintenance is becoming a burden. Where will you go? Evelyn asked, feeling a surprising pang at the thought of George leaving the neighborhood. Not one of those retirement communities, he added quickly. Just smaller homes with association, maintained exteriors. I looked at a unit there yesterday. And? Evelyn prompted when he fell silent. I made an offer, he said simply. It was accepted this morning. George, that's wonderful, Evelyn exclaimed, genuinely pleased for her friend. When do you close? The next week passed in a flurry of unpacking, organizing, and settling in. Each day, the bungalow felt more like home as Evelyn arranged her possessions, hung artwork, and added the personal touches that transformed a house into a sanctuary. Margaret and Emma came as promised on Wednesday, helping to set up the guest room for Thomas's visit. They hung curtains, made up the bed with fresh linens, and arranged a small vase of flowers on the dresser. It looks perfect, Margaret declared, stepping back to admire their work. Thomas will be comfortable here. I hope so, Evelyn said. It's important to me that both my children feel at home when they visit. Margaret met her eyes, understanding the subtle message. We do, Mom. This place already feels like you warm, welcoming, full of character. Friday evening arrived, and with it came Thomas, looking tired from his flight, but pleased to see his mother settled in her new home. This is really nice, Mom, he said as she showed him around. I can see why you fell in love with it. You approve then? Evelyn asked, realizing how much his opinion still mattered to her, despite her determination to make this decision independently. Absolutely, Thomas assured her. It's perfect for you, the right size, great location, lots of charm, and I'm relieved you're closer to Margaret and the kids. They spent a pleasant evening catching up, Thomas sharing news of his work and his relationship with Melissa, who hadn't been able to join him due to a work commitment. Evelyn told him about the selling process for the old house, the smooth closing on the bungalow, and her plans for the small backyard. I'm thinking of putting in raised garden beds, she explained. Easier on the knees as I get older, but still allowing me to grow my own vegetables. Smart. Thomas nodded. And maybe a small patio set under that maple tree? It would be a perfect spot for morning coffee. Exactly what I was thinking. Evelyn smiled, pleased by his understanding. The next day, Margaret and her family joined them for a barbecue in Evelyn's new backyard. Jack manned the grill, while the children explored every corner of the property, and the adults enjoyed drinks on the stone patio. To Mom, Margaret proposed a toast, raising her glass of lemonade. For showing us all that life's changes can be embraced with grace and determination. To Mom, Thomas echoed, his beer glass clinking against his sister's. Evelyn felt a rush of emotion at her children's words and expressions. They had come to accept of and admire her decision. The tension that had marked her relationship with Margaret just weeks ago had transformed into a new respect. After dinner, as dusk settled over the yard, Lucas approached his grandmother with a serious expression. Grandma, I have something important to ask you. What is it, sweetheart? Evelyn replied, giving him her full attention. Now that you live so close to us, he began, his 9-year-old face solemn. Could I come over after school sometimes? Mom says I'm old enough to walk by myself, and I could do my homework here, and maybe you could teach me to make those chocolate chip cookies Emma's always talking about. Evelyn's heart swelled with joy at the simple request. I would love that, Lucas. Nothing would make me happier. His face broke into a relieved grin. Cool, can I start on Monday? Margaret, who had overheard the exchange, raised an eyebrow at her mother. Are you sure, Mom? He can be a handful. I'm positive, Evelyn said firmly. What's the point of living close by if I don't get to enjoy my grandchildren more often? Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and Thomas had retired to the guest room, Evelyn sat alone on her front porch, reflecting on the day. The bungalow was already fulfilling its promise, bringing her closer to her family while maintaining her independence. The week that followed Thomas's visit established new patterns and routines. True to his word, Lucas appeared at her door Monday afternoon, backpack slung over one shoulder, ready for cookies and conversation. Wednesday brought Emma, seeking a quiet place to study away from her brother's noise. And on Thursday, to Evelyn's surprise, Zachary knocked on her door, asking if she could help him with a family history project for school. "Mom said you know all the old stories," he explained, setting up his notebook at her kitchen island. "About great-grandpa fighting in World War II and great-grandma working in the factory." "I do indeed," Evelyn confirmed, delighted by his interest. "And I have photographs too." They spent the afternoon going through old albums, Evelyn sharing stories that brought their ancestors to life for her grandson. Watching his face as he absorbed these family tales, she felt a profound sense of continuity, the passing of history from one generation to the next. On Friday morning, as Evelyn was tending to her newly planted window boxes, a sleek silver car pulled into her driveway. Margaret emerged, dressed in her doctor's coat, clearly on her way to the office. "Mom, do you have a minute?" she called, approaching the porch. "Of course," Evelyn replied, setting aside her gardening tools. "Is everything all right?" Margaret joined her on the porch, her expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "Everything's fine. I wanted to say something, and it seemed better to do it in person." Evelyn gestured to the wicker chairs she'd arranged for morning coffee and evening contemplation. "Sit with me?" They settled into the chairs, Margaret perched on the edge of hers as if prepared for a quick departure. "What's on your mind?" Evelyn prompted gently. Margaret took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology, Mom. I've been thinking about it all week, watching how happy you are here, seeing how the kids are drawn to you and this house." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I was wrong to push the retirement community idea so hard, and I was wrong to react the way I did when you made your own decision." Evelyn reached over and covered her daughter's hand with her own. "Thank you for saying that, but I understand why you were concerned." "No, it was more than concern," Margaret admitted. "It was control. I thought I knew what was best for you, without really listening to what you wanted." She met her mother's eyes directly. "I treated you like you were becoming incapable, and that wasn't fair. You're more capable than most people half your age." The acknowledgement, so direct and honest, touched Evelyn deeply. "We all want to protect the people we love," she said softly. "Sometimes we just go about it the wrong way. The kids adore coming here," Margaret continued. "Lucas talks about nothing else but his after-school visits. Even Zach, who's at that age where nothing impresses him, mentioned how cool your house is." Evelyn smiled. "They're welcome anytime. Having them drop by has been the greatest joy of this move." "That's just it," Margaret said earnestly. "You've created this wonderful new space that draws the family together, but on your terms. It's inspiring, actually." "Inspiring?" Evelyn repeated, surprised by the word choice. Margaret nodded. "It's made me think about how I approach change in my own life. And how I might be treating my own children the way I treated you, making assumptions about what they need rather than listening to them." This level of self-reflection was unusual for Margaret, who typically moved through life with confident certainty. Evelyn felt a surge of pride in her daughter's growth. "It's never too late to adjust our approach," she offered, "with each other or with your children." "I'm trying," Margaret said with a rueful smile. "Emma actually thanked me yesterday for backing off about her choice of extracurricular activities. Apparently, I was being totally controlling about it." Evelyn laughed softly. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, it seems." Margaret's expression turned serious again. "I want you to know that I'm genuinely happy for you, Mom. This place, this decision, it was absolutely the right one. I can see that now." "Thank you," Evelyn said simply. "That means more to me than you know." As Margaret prepared to leave for work, she paused at the steps of the porch. "Oh, I almost forgot to ask. Jack and I are hosting a dinner next Friday for his colleagues. Would you be willing to make your famous apple pie? No one does it like you." "I'd be delighted," Evelyn agreed, pleased by the request. "Should I bring anything else?" "Just yourself," Margaret said. Then with a slightly mischievous smile, "And maybe George, if he'd like to come. The kids mentioned he stops by here quite often." Evelyn felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "We're friends, Margaret. Neighbors." "Of course," Margaret replied, her tone deliberately neutral. "Friends are always welcome." After Margaret drove away, Evelyn remained on the porch, reflecting on their conversation. The apology had been unexpected, but deeply appreciated a vindication of sorts for the stand she'd taken. More importantly, it represented a shift in their relationship. Margaret was seeing her not just as her mother who needed protection, but as Evelyn Harrington, a woman of substance and agency, capable of making sound decisions for her own life. The realization brought a sense of profound satisfaction. This had never been merely about a house. It had been about autonomy, respect, and the right to shape her own future. As if to punctuate this thought, her phone buzzed with a text message from George. "Inspection went well. Closing still on track. Celebratory dinner tonight?" Setting her phone aside, Evelyn gazed out at her front garden, already planning where to plant bulbs for spring flowers. Beyond the garden, the neighborhood stretched before her new community, close to family yet distinctly her own domain. The autumn breeze carried the scent of ripening apples from a nearby tree, and Evelyn breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the promise of seasons to come. There would be holidays in this house, family gatherings, quiet evenings with friends, mornings alone with her thoughts and memories. There would be challenges too, no doubt. Age would continue its inevitable progress. Health concerns might arise. The future held no guarantees. But for now, in this moment, Evelyn Harrington sat on the porch of her craftsman bungalow, a home she had chosen, on a path she had forged, in a life that remained vibrantly her own. And that, she reflected, as she rose to begin preparations for dinner with George, was the most profound victory of all.